This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome to Inside the Paint. And in honor of the Heat's ensemble, I've got one of my little ensembles right here. See, she's our Dwayne Dedman. It's spring break, so we got everybody home. She's our Dwayne Dedman. She's the one who goes out there. She can be a little bit of a little bit loud, but she knows how to grab the rebounds, right, sweetie? Okay, we're gonna put her down. So Ira, I want to talk about what we've seen in these first couple of games, and we touched on a little bit before the crossover, and the Heat's ensemble. I'm trying to be as smooth as I can here. She came in here. These kids don't know what to do during spring break.
So do you call her the mechanic also? That's what I need to know with the Dwayne.
Should we call you the mechanic, Abry? Should we call you the mechanic? She's giving me a look right now. But Dwayne Dedman is somebody that I think, when you're talking about this Heat ensemble, the fact that they've got all these guys who can come out there and contribute in some way.
Yes.
And yet what we saw last night is what every championship team needs, I think, is that one guy who can take over down the stretch. And we've talked all year, and I'll admit I've said it over and over again, that I'd gotten to the point where I was more comfortable with the ball being in Tyler Hero's hands in the fourth quarter, even than I was Jimmy Butler. And I was wrong. And who knows? We'll see how this plays out throughout the rest of the playoffs. But
right.
Jimmy was right. And that's what we're going to start. Jimmy talked all season, and frankly, he talked last season about the ability to flip a switch. And I think we all kind of looked at this and we're, well, it didn't happen last year. You played against Milwaukee, you shot 29%.
Yeah.
And yet this season, things felt a little bit different. I don't think we were fully ready to embrace the idea that, hey, he can just flip a switch. And I think there was a little more to it.
Right.
That just because Jimmy flips a switch, the rest of the team needs to be able to kind of coalesce and play like that around him. I stole your word, Ira. But
I'll tell Jimmy. Okay.
I think what we've seen is it's happened. And, maybe this is just a couple of games against a team that is, perhaps the worst team in the Eastern Conference playoff field.
A 9 seed. Yeah, a 9 seed that got up to 8. So, yeah, perspective. Absolutely.
And yet, I think it's fair to say at this point that he has flipped a switch. He's done what he said he was going to do. And having that moment last night, I think it makes you feel better moving forward through the rest of these playoffs, that you have that one guy who can take it to another level when necessary. Because frankly, we'll get to last game a little bit. I felt like in that second quarter, you had one of those moments where it was the officials were calling it really, really tight, really much tighter than they were in game one.
Well, not according to Trae Young, but okay, we'll get into that also.
Don't get me going on that. They're really inside his head, by the way.
Yes.
I mean, I don't remember. It's rare to see a star get rattled as much as I feel like Trae was last night. And he still played fine, but you could see they're in his head. But they were calling it so tight last night. They were calling every little thing. And it was like Jimmy finally sensed that in the second quarter. And I can get to the line. I can stop this Hawks run. And it's just having that sense for when to do something a little bit different that he just, he did it last night. He was right. And a lot of us, including me, were wrong.
All the comparisons and the stories today, Dave Hyde wrote a column. There's been a bunch at ESPN and elsewhere comparing Jimmy to Dwayne Wade. I'm more comparing Jimmy, honestly, and I think he even looks like LeBron right now. When I watch right now with that arm sleeve on and his musculature and the way he's playing, LeBron, there was nothing fancy about LeBron's game. Dwayne was spinny. Dwayne had all these little sort of subtle moves.
Yes.
This is brute force. This is, I am going to clear space for a short jumper, the mid-range. I am going to go up for the three from a position of strength, or I'm going to attack. And with that arm sleeve and just the way he looked, it really reminded me of LeBron James type of play. There were times when I looked down on the court, we sit mid-level, mid-tier there at the arena, and I was like, wait, is that Jimmy or is that LeBron? I'm not comparing their games and their life statistics and all that.
But let me say this, Ira, because I think you hit on, and this is something I've always said about Jimmy.
Sure.
He is, if LeBron, the thing we say about LeBron is he's just so good at everything. If LeBron is an A- or an A at everything, I think you can compare Jimmy Butler to LeBron in this respect too. If LeBron is an A or an A- at everything, Jimmy is a B+ ish at everything. And the shooting is something that he was not for a while. He was obviously last night. But I think your comparison is really good between the two players. Jimmy is kind of like a quarter of a step below LeBron and everything, but he does everything well like LeBron did. So go ahead.
Yeah, and you saw it last night, and he picks his moments, and he can have those moments. That's the thing with Jimmy. I'm not going to sit here and debate with you whether Jimmy's a top 5 player. He's not. I could debate with you whether he's a top 10 player and certainly a top 15 player. But I will say this. Jimmy can have the type of moments of a top 5 player. And it's those guys. It's Jimmy. It's Jason Tatum. It's guys you never know when it's going to happen, but you know it's there. It was not there at all against the Milwaukee Bucks, a much higher pedigree of team that we're seeing against the Atlanta Hawks in this season's first round. Again, different horses for different courses, a lesser opponent. This is why you get the number 1 seed. Because if you get the number 2, you're playing the Brooklyn Nets. If you get the number 4, you're playing the Toronto Raptors. The Heat set it up this way to get this opponent and play this way. And you're seeing that they're attacking the moment. I always look at games sort of, I don't want to say half empty, although maybe I am being that way. You go into last night's game and you say, if the Heat lose that game, if the Hawks complete that comeback from 16 down at the start of the fourth, early in the fourth, to within 3, Clay, I think you would agree everything changes about how this Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint show is going for an hour today here on the Big O Show. And yet I would look at it this way also. And folks, I know I've been through too much of this, but if the Heat lose on Friday, all of a sudden the Hawks go, okay, we're within 1-2 right now, and we're at home again on Sunday, and they haven't won on our court, and we can get this thing back to Miami even at 2-2, and then it's a best-of-3 series. You don't want that either. Now we're going to see if the Heat have what they didn't have last night, but they had in the 2020 playoffs, when they swept Indy in the first round, when they took care of Milwaukee in 5 games in the second round. They need to do that. If they are the number 1 seed, playing number 9 that went to number 8 in the first round, you take care of business, like we said in the crosstalk with Big O, and you move on. You don't risk injuries. You keep your 36-year-old point guard and your 37-year-old power forward healthy for another series. You give yourself a break. Even if the Heat sweep and the Sixers sweep, they're not starting right away next Tuesday. The league needs to space this out. Instead, we're going to get to see a lot more Boston, Brooklyn. We'll see maybe a little bit more of Milwaukee, Chicago, if the Bulls can win a series. But if the Heat are who at this moment they think they are, they take care of business as much on Friday in State Farm Arena as they did last night at FTX.
See, Dolly, you was wrong, Clay. Shame. I was. And look, there's a whole lot of playoffs left, and yet I think it is fair to say that when you have somebody who said all along, I'll flip a switch in the playoffs, and he's shown in 2 games that he's flipped a switch in the playoffs, it can always revert back. But I think it is fair to say that, look, he's a different player now than we saw throughout the regular season. Jimmy Butler knew when to jump up and grab that moment. You give him a lot of credit for that. Dirty dog defense needs to keep the pressure on. Lowry living in Trae Young's head rent-free, veteran pressure from someone who's been to the dance from the greater good. So and we'll talk about this a little bit too. I feel like watching last night's game, the Heat have found a great plan for Trae Young, just like they had a great plan for Giannis a couple of years ago. And frankly, they had a great plan for Giannis last year. It's just that everything else went wrong. It's that they couldn't rebound. Middleton and Drew Holiday were outstanding. I mean, so, it's they have a way to attack and slow down the best player on the opposing team. And you could tell that it was in Trae's head. I mean, I know he often makes these 35-foot shots, but the difference is he makes other shots before it to get into a rhythm, to where when he hits those, and there was a moment in the fourth quarter where you saw it, but you saw it with Bogdan Bogdanovic.
Yeah.
Where because they were focusing so much on Trae Young, Bogdanovic just kept getting free. I mean, he was getting clean looks.
He was the comeback. Yeah.
He was the comeback single-handedly. And there was that one shot that he hit in the corner. I think it was Jimmy Butler who was on him, where he Bogdanovic pump fakes. Jimmy's right in his grill. And it was almost like a heat check. He just kind of slides to the side and then shoots a fade away through, and it goes in. What happens in these games, and you see it over and over again, I see it a lot with the Heat. If you let guys get into a rhythm where they get 1 or 2 easy shots, then all of a sudden those seemingly hard shots become easy because they're in a rhythm. They're used to seeing the ball go in the cup. So, and by the way, I thought we saw it a bit in reverse last night, where unlike in game 1, where Duncan Robinson was able to get whatever he wanted. He didn't even take a shot in the first half of last night, and it was because Atlanta focused a lot more on him. And so he couldn't get one or two easy ones to where the hard ones, like the 4-point play in game one, started to fall. So I'm saying all this because you mentioned the comeback that Atlanta had. I feel like there's a lesson to be learned from that, in that you do have to keep throwing bodies at Trae Young and focus on him and make sure you're in his head. Because you mentioned Kyle Lowry, Gabe Vincent's done a great job on him. PJ Tucker, when he's gotten ISO'd on him until they started calling every foul last night. Bam Adebayo when he gets switched.
Right.
Any one of the players who are on the floor outside of Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson, you feel comfortable that those guys can guard Trae and at least make his life difficult. Don't let him get a couple of easy ones, because then you see what you saw from Bogdanović in the fourth quarter last night, which is you get a couple of easy ones, the hard ones become easy, and all of a sudden you got a big problem on your hands. And that's what I think
it's interesting, Clay. I was driving home last night and I spoke to someone who spoke to a member of the Hawks traveling party. And that person had a really interesting line that created pause for me. And they said Trae Young is still the kind of young player that so wants to be a star that he keeps trying to make the big, spectacular play instead of the right play. And for those who haven't had a chance to glance at the box score or had to go to bed early, Trae Young closed with 10 turnovers. That is a career high for Trae Young. That is the most ever by a Heat playoff opponent. And I think there's some truth to that, that if Trae Young, or even Clay Young, would just sort of bring his game a little more in order and not try to be spectacular all the time, I think he would be far better off as a player. But I don't know, maybe that's the culture and just who he wants to be. But I did want to get this in the first segment, so I'm going to go down to a show sheet. Let's see, this is item 7A you had on the show sheet, but I want to bring this up a little earlier. Trae Young's complaining about foul calls. Clay, I think when you get an opponent doing that, you're winning.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, you're in his head. Yes, Jimmy got to the foul line all the time. Trae just got to the line 3 or 4 from the line last night. He had his 7 to 8 free throws in game one. He lives at the line. Last year when Atlanta went to the conference finals,
and by the way, I'm going to cut you off, Ira.
Sure.
With respect to the cranberries in your head.
I'm losing you there.
Let's have it, Sean. In your head. In your head. Because I was thinking the same thing you were.
Right.
And the graphic is going to switch at some point here. But no, I'm thinking the exact same thing you were. So go ahead.
Yeah, and the fact, Clay, that
not
he did
a Dolores, not a Dolores O'Riordan fan. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You're a zombie.
All right, and it's good to know someone out there is paying attention. Clay, when you heard, I don't know if you were driving home like me or heard in the postgame before you left the arena yesterday, but when you hear Trae Young saying how the officials are letting the Heat get away with all that, and we've got to get some calls, if I'm Nate McMillan, if I'm one of Trae's teammates, if I'm Hawks fan, that's a real concern. Because you know there is nothing that a Pat Riley team wants more than to get in your head. And where do the Heat live right now? In the head of Trae Young.
100%. And it's, look, this is playoff basketball. And look, I will say this, and I just to not sound completely homer about this. The Atlanta Hawks Bally feed had a montage of some of the stuff that the Heat were doing to Trae Young in game one. And it kind of go over the line just a little bit. Okay. I will admit that. I will admit some of the stuff that there was an elbow to the chest slash neck.
Yeah, no, there were some moments there, Clay, as we try to get back in order here with our video alignment. There were absolutely some moments where the Heat were being the Heat and physical as they can. If you remember, there was a previous Heat playoff series. The Hawks radio announcer's been there for about 40 years. When he just started ranting, this is thuggery. This is pure thuggery. Remember that?
Right.
Yes, that was when, and that was actually a series that the Hawks won when the Heat were playing physical. This is what you get. This is not Trae Young getting the Knicks in last season's first round. This is him not getting softer opponents. This is another lesson for him, just like it was a lesson for whether it's Duncan Robinson not even able to get a shot off last night. Trae Young said this after the game. He said, our defensive focus was not to let Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero get off. This goes, of course, to what Eric Spoelstra always says. if those guys can be factors without getting shots off because of the way they play. We saw that last night. That freed Jimmy up for almost nothing but one-on-one coverage. But, man, if you can get into a head right now, this is a physical Heat team. This is not the most physical Heat team. We've seen more, to use their radio guys' words, thuggery in previous Heat seasons with previous Heat renditions. So I think when you look at this Heat team right now and those Trae Young comments, that stood out to me. I got up this morning, just posted a story at sunsentinel.com, because if another guy is complaining about officiating, one, it enters that into the equation. Now we're all watching the officials in Game 4 in Atlanta. But two, if that's how you think you're going to turn a series by the whistle instead of by an upgrade in your play, hey, I'm all for it. Go for it, buddy.
And C. Dollar brings this up. He says, hey, LeBron and D. Wade complained about officials a lot of times too. And they did, but it's different in this respect. D. Wade and LeBron were established guys who had been through this. And look, nobody's doubting Trae Young's talent and the type of player he can be when he's on. But he doesn't have the type of pedigree yet where he is going to influence the officiating in a series by simply popping off in post-game news conferences. You know, it's not like when Phil Jackson used to say things in post-game news conferences that was very pointed. Right. And the next game, all of a sudden, the Lakers would get every single call.
And he and Riley would go at each other, sure.
Yes. And so there's a way to go about it. And last night, the way Trae Young did it, it felt more like complaining post-game as opposed to lobbying for the future. And the other thing is...
And after 10 turnovers. So if you're saying the officials made mistakes, you made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of your own. It just seemed like the whole timing was not the best for Trae or his look.
And not only that, Ira, but... my voice got a little high right there. Not only that, Ira, but it was after, and I kept saying this on Twitter. I know nobody likes to hear stuff over and over again like this because it sounds like whining. The officiating was too tight for a playoff game last night. Some of the stuff they were calling, and the foul on Kyle Lowry when he got shoved into John Collins. I mean, there's stuff that you don't call in a playoff game that kept getting called last night. So the timing of Trae Young complaining after a game in which they called it they called that tighter than a regular season game in January.
Excruciatingly tight. You're correct.
It was, and it just made the level of play ugly. But bringing it full circle here, that's when your star needs to understand what's needed. And Jimmy Butler did. And in particular, in the second quarter, when the Hawks were starting to get a little bit, they started to kind of take advantage of that. Jimmy was like, okay, fine. If I'm going to get a call every time somebody breathes on me, I'm going to attack the basket. And I'm going to, and by that point, I remember how many points he had specifically in that run to end the second quarter. But it's what Eric Spoelstra says all the time about Jimmy Butler, that he senses what needs to be done in the moment in big games. And last night he did that. Whereas to your point about Trae Young, after speaking to somebody in the Hawks traveling party, that he still tries to make the big play, not necessarily the right play.
Yes.
You got to have that extra sense for the game. And Trae Young will get it. He's somebody who's just so talented.
But will he get it in this series? Will he have time to get it in this series?
No. And that's where, look, we'll talk more about the future of the series coming up on the other side. I'm not going to be so concerned, and I'm not trying to give them an out here. I'm not going to be so concerned if this isn't a sweep. I think because Trae Young is so good, because this team does play better, especially against Miami on its own home floor, I'm not going to get overly concerned if you lose game 3. I do think you have to get a split in Atlanta and end this thing in Miami in game 5. Make sure that you don't extend this series at all, because you don't want a Devin Booker situation like we saw last night. You don't want to extend this series and get into those sorts of problems. So a lot more to get to on Inside the Paint. We're going to talk about what's going on around the league. And then I also want to talk a little bit about, Ira, the ensemble and the old theory that your stars have to be the guys who carry you in the playoffs. Can this ensemble help the Heat win enough games to get to the 16 that they need to win a title? That and a lot more next here on Inside the Paint.
This is the